Hello again, everyone. Thanks for attending today's webinar. So my name's Brian. I'm going to be the moderator here today. I'm the Director of Products and Services here at Habanero, and we're very excited to be able to co-present with our client, Arc'teryx, today. Today's webinar is a wonderful sneak peek into all the great things they're doing to create exceptional employee experiences within their organizations. I think we're really lucky to be able to look behind the curtain and see some of what they and we are up to around organizational purpose. Today's webinar will be about 40 minutes. We'll have some Q&A after that. So if you have any questions that pop up while you're listening, I'll be moderating. Just post your questions in the GoToMeeting software and we'll try to answer them at the end. And so now I'll turn it over to Jessica O'Dowd from Arc'teryx and Barb Richards from Habanero to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, my name is Jess O'Dowd, and I'm the Talent Communications Lead at Arc'teryx Equipment. We're a design-led organization that creates beautiful outdoor apparel and gear. We're based in North Vancouver, BC. My job is to lead internal communications and employee experience. So like many of you watching here, I consider myself a change maker. My role is particularly in internal communications, and it's really shifted in the last year or so, and now includes leading workshops on feedback, personal purpose, and design thinking. A little bit about me personally, I love riding bikes, and I'm super excited because my 2-year-old is now crushing hills on the playground on her run bike. So I have a little built-in bike buddy. I hope she waits for me.
Hi, and I'm Barb. I'm a consultant at Habanero. I work on user experience projects, change and transformation, and employee experience projects as well. I also happen to live on the North Shore of Vancouver, which happens to be both near Arc'teryx and our local mountains. And so one of the favorite things for our family is to spend a lot of time in the mountains with our Black Lab. So today is about answering the question, how might we align everyone around a common purpose and values? And how finding the path to this in an organization can feel quite hazy and unclear. However, not to worry, there happens to be an excellent tool suited to challenges like this, which is design thinking. When you take these two things and you pair our challenge around purpose and values with design thinking, you actually get a bit of magic. You can lean on a proven methodology suited to the challenge. And what it does is it really clears away the fog that happens. So today we want to show you how you can use design thinking concepts to guide you through creating a stronger sense of purpose in an organization. So today our time with you is divided into these areas today. Most of our time will be spent on sharing and embedding purpose, that section around the halfway point. Then we'll share some outcomes and learnings and have some time for Q&A at the end. So a bit about us. So our two organizations have been working together for close to 3 years. Both of our organizations have a strong culture of collaboration, so it's been very natural for our two organizations to work together. Habanero believes in working together to create solutions with, not for, an organization, especially around things related to personal purpose and culture. And from the beginning, Arc'teryx has been incredibly committed in everything we've worked with them on. A bit about Habanero. We all care deeply about helping organizations become better places to work. Bringing life to work is a bit of a tagline for us. You might have heard the statistic from Gallup that only around 1/3 of employees are engaged with their work. We consider this a problem in the world, both for organizations and the people that work in them, that we want to be part of solving. We do this through employee experience projects in both the culture and transformation space, as well as the IT space. A little bit more about Habanero. Our workplace has been very much intentionally designed to be a place that makes people want to come to work and then be part of high-performing teams that make a difference in the world. As some testament to our success, we've been recognized from the Globe and Mail's Great Place to Work and been in the top 5 for 9 years in a row and #1 3 times, including the past year. We've loved purpose and design thinking since the beginning of our company, and both these concepts are foundational to our company and who we are. I'm going to turn it over to Jess to talk a little bit about Arc'teryx.
Thanks, Barb. So if you haven't heard about Arc'teryx, we were born on a pursuit of product perfection that bordered on obsession in a climber's basement in the late 80s. And in 1992, we set up shop in North Van, and we created the revolutionary vapor climbing harness. So this harness had a quality control standard so high that even a dropped bobbin stitch meant it was rejected. If you don't know what a bobbin stitch is, you can give that a Google. It's a sewing term. Jackets and packs followed a few years later, and the same standards applied. So if you've always wondered about what the name means, we're named for the Berlin species, also known as the Archaeopteryx lithographica, which was the first dinosaur to evolve a wing for flight. But that doesn't really fit well on a t-shirt, does it? So we tightened it up, and we're known affectionately as the bird to staff and brand fans. We are who we are because of where we were born in the North Shore Mountains, and it really is this environment that continually inspires us. We've situated our headquarters so that we can design, build, and test our product all in the same day. And at the office, we're all users of the product, testing it on the weekends and even sometimes during the week. And we stand behind our product with a lifetime warranty. We design and build our prototypes locally in Vancouver. It's one of our proud points of difference. We know how to build stuff, and we teach our partners around the world how to build stuff too. And this partnership is really unique in our industry. We also have a local factory in New Westminster, just about a 40-minute drive from our head office, that we've doubled inside over the last 2 years. So today we're going to share a little bit about our journey taken with our adventure partners here at Habanero to finding organizational purpose. And it all really started when we found ourselves in a situation where we were asking ourselves questions. You know, we have a unique and special culture, but we didn't have the words for it. And we found ourselves debating if decisions would reflect who we are or not. You know, and wondered if articulating our purpose would strengthen our sense of who we are and enable autonomy and alignment. So what is at the heart of who we are? And what words best represent us? How do we create the conditions for employees to own and invest in what we're about? And how do we lean into this essence as we continue to evolve and grow? So the question for us was really, how might we align our employees on a shared sense of purpose, ultimately to preserve this essence as we continue to grow? So I'm going to just take a moment and draw attention to the factor that we're asking this question as a how might we statement. And this is a common design thinking tool that really helps us to frame things constructively. So now I'm going to pass it over to Barb, and she can tell you all about why purpose is important.
Okay, so before we dig into the why, let's just talk briefly about the what of purpose. So here's a definition of purpose, which is really the reason something is done or for which something exists. Also like to share a quote with you from Stephen Fitzgerald, who happens to be the president of Habanero, which is that a purpose should be deep enough that even if you had to change industries, you could still live out your purpose. So we'll be sharing the purpose statement that Arc'teryx came up with later, where you can see that it goes beyond designing amazing outdoor gear or even being outside. And the reason for this deeper purpose is it opens you up to a lot more possibilities. Values, which is really the how you live out your purpose. We'll also be sharing out the values that were shared along with the purpose later in this presentation as well. And again, it's principles or standards of behaviors or a judgment of what's important in life. Again, quoting Stephen, values are born out of the real life challenges and privileges your organization has experienced. And so that's where identifying values is typically more an exercise in archaeology versus invention, and a process of uncovering the values in your organization that have been shaped over time. So now that we've covered the what, let's have a little look at the why. So the big why is it's not the 1950s anymore. In fact, we're well into the 2000s now. And so thinking about managing organizations, it was really invented in the 1800s during the Industrial Revolution and then mastered in the 1950s. In general, it was a world that contained many more repeat and predictable tasks than what we have today. I'm guessing you listening today don't at all consider your jobs routine in the least. However, a lot of organizations are still structures that still represent that. Thinking back, management structure, hierarchies were designed more for efficiency and what some people might describe as a command and control structure to get these repeatable tasks done. Learning and development was heavier in what we call training, or about getting people to perform in a similar way, much different than now. Performance reviews were based more on comparison to others, whereas now we're seeing much more uniqueness in people's performance. And finally, there's pay for performance, which is some pretty simplistic ideas about motivation, such as more pay directly links to motivation, and this being at the heart of motivating employees. So I just want to draw a couple attention to a couple of resources and models that we think supports and shows how times are changing. One is Daniel Pink's Drive. It's a great resource. The ideas in it have been really important in shaping employee experience at Habanero. There's 3 key ideas in it. One is autonomy, which is really being empowered in how you go about doing your work. Mastery, which is having the opportunity to excel at something. And I bet you're going to guess the third, which is purpose, which is really having a meaningful reason for doing something. And so these are the 3 main things that drive motivation in people. Another model we really like is from this book. We see some similarities between the 2 models, but some people really resonate with this idea of play in this book. The other one is purpose is one of the main ideas here, as well as potential. And so these things are actually shown in this book to actually drive performance. So they're related to motivation as well as performance. So again, we see purpose as key concepts in each of those. Carrying on it's not in the 1950s theme anymore, very recently, in fact, earlier this year, there was Larry Fink's letter to CEOs, which some of you listening may or may not have heard about. It made quite a few waves in some circles, and some people see it as marking a milestone in how we think about organizations. So Larry Fink is the CEO of BlackRock, which is one of the world's largest investment funds. It manages 6.3 trillion in assets, and in case you're wondering, that's actually 12 zeros. You can read his whole letter online, preferably not now while you're listening to this webinar, but the key idea in it is this quote which we pulled out, which is, without a sense of purpose, no company, either public or private, can achieve its potential. So the takeaway is, the leader of one of the largest investment funds in the world says companies have to be about more than profit. So I'm now going to turn it over to Jess to talk about how Arc'teryx feels about it.
Yeah, we feel the same way, really. Our president, John Horoff, has this to say: we want people to come to Arc'teryx to do great work and to have great lives. And really, that's about a lot more than profit. Laura Appleton, who happens to be our senior manager of people and culture, says that it's our responsibility to empower people to come to work with their whole selves and to perform at their absolute best. We've got a couple other leaders with good things to say here too, so we'll share a couple more. We've got Dan Green, who is our VP of Design, and he says, we exist to be leaders and make a real difference. We want our lives and the things we produce to be highly meaningful. So we create the space and expectations to bring innovative ideas to life. And this is really about building an environment where people are inspired to create the most amazing products that people fall in love with. For example, we got this incredible letter from a customer who loved our gear so much. He had this backpack called a Blade 21, and he sent it back to us to show us what it looks like after 4,368 days of constant use in all sorts of weather. And ultimately, we want to inspire this love and loyalty in our designs. We believe that our customer experiences are closely tied to our employee experiences. So this gentleman didn't even want a replacement and didn't want his pack back. He didn't want a warranty special offer, even though we offered it to him. He just told us to keep up the good work and that he'd remain a loyal Arc'teryx fan and customer. And ultimately, we want this to be the norm rather than the exception. So a quick recap on the why of purpose. And the first is that purpose drives performance, that it helps people to do great work and to have great lives, that it enables us to preserve our culture and a strong sense of the collective, and that it ultimately inspires us to continue to create amazing product and loyalty. And for us, back to what Laura of People and Culture had to say, purpose is really about empowering our employees with the guidance and tools they need to perform at their absolute best. So how might we use design thinking to explore organizational purpose? We're going to go over the fundamentals of design thinking briefly and how we applied them. And then we're going to share how we use these ideas to roll out purpose. So design thinking, with origins in the design world, came as a response to a complex environment where there were a lot of unknowns, and there was an intention of building something for someone else without really knowing them. So this process is now being used outside of design, and it's a term coined by a company called IDEO. If you haven't heard of them, you can also give them a Google. They originated as a product design company and now are much, much more. And there are variations of these 5 distinct phases of design thinking, but this is how Arc'teryx chooses to define the process. One thing to note here is that it's really not a linear process, nor is it as neat and tidy as just following these steps. So at Arc'teryx, we believe there are some necessary values that go along with design thinking, and embracing them has really helped us be successful in using it. Some of the wording might be a little different than what you've seen in your experience with design thinking, because we've taken the ideas and made them our own, and actually we recommend doing that. It's totally okay to make it fit with your culture. So the first is being human-centered, then we've got being visual, collaboration, being hungry for feedback, and being brave because it's okay to fail. So being human-centered is really about always considering your user, your audience, your employees, your humans at the center. Visualization allows for a deeper, more shared understanding, and you really don't have to be an artist to be visual. It could simply mean drawing pictures or mapping out processes, or even just putting stickies on a wall. And collaboration, this one's really about finding opportunities to gain some perspective and objectivity in the process, and about empowering a team to find solutions versus simply authorizing a team. So we embedded collaboration into our process with a cross-functional team. We had people from various corners of the organization, including sustainability, product, brand, creative, as well as people and culture, which is the department formerly known as HR. And it's really an evolution of the typical HR team. People and culture reflects our commitment to the development of our employees and their experience. Number 4, so feedback is really key to this process, and going back to your people, which are your users, your audience, or employees, and requesting feedback from them frequently and specifically. This also really helps bring them into your process. And last but not least, the final piece is that you need to be brave. You want to try new things, you want to learn, you want to fail forward and evolve. That's something we feel really connected to at Arc'teryx. Design thinking really felt like a natural fit for us because our designers had been doing this for years, and why not apply it to greater business problems? Turns out it works really well outside of the design world. So the alternatives to using a design thinking approach could be hiring a consultant to establish a purpose for you. You could have your senior leadership team create it and cascade it down. The risk here is that it just falls flat. Ugh. So now I'm going to hand this over to Barb to share how design thinking was the right tool to roll out purpose.
Thanks, Jess. So I'm going to walk through these 5 concepts and explain how we use them to roll out purpose. I also want to point out that there were 2, as we worked through this process, 2 things were happening in parallel. One is that the purpose statement and values were being created, and then alongside the planning to share them were happening. So they were happening pretty much in parallel, although the purpose statement and values were partially baked before we started planning on sharing. Today is mostly about number 2. We're sharing how we use design thinking to share the purpose and values. So let's take the first idea that Jess introduced you to, which is empathize. Another way of saying empathize is seeking to deeply understand all the people involved, which in this case was Arc'teryx employees. It's obviously highly related to the value of being human-centered. So what does this look like in practice? Again, it's really seeking to understand your people. At the heart of this idea is that if you don't understand your people, if your solution is for people, it's not likely to work. It's also safe to say that not everyone in your organization is having the same experience. And so this is why we created personas or archetypes, you can call them either things, and did some research around them in order to understand different people throughout the organization. So in this example here, you can see we had sort of 6 buckets of employees that we spent time with. So from there, it's really gathering empathetic data, which means understanding what motivates people, what they care about, what they see as special about Arc'teryx. We also, in speaking to these different groups of people, explored any kinds of potential barriers or friction that they saw around them that might prevent them being open to purpose and values and understanding them. So really it meant we involved people from around the organization, and what this looked like was consulting and spending time with people in the design center and getting their feedback and asking them these questions. We also spent time with people at the factory. You can imagine people working in a factory have quite a different employee experience and perspective from designers at headquarters. So it was very important to explore that. They also tended to have different questions and interests from other employees in other parts of the organization around purpose and culture. Again, people in the retail stores have a very unique position in the organization. They have a lot of direct contact with customers. They're away from headquarters, they're away from the factory, so it was really important to get their perspective as well. And finally, we also consulted with people in supporting roles such as IT, marketing, customer service at headquarters. So that was a lot of qualitative data that we gathered and a lot of conversations that we had with people. We also included some quantitative data. So we happen to use Culture Amp. We use them also at Habanero, and we like them a lot because their tool is very user-friendly, which helps get a good response rate. And there's also very good segmenting in this tool that allowed us to match our survey data against the sessions we had with different people. And it was a big part of understanding people in the organization. And we asked questions in the survey that were complemented our in-person sessions. Next up in the concepts we're covering is understand the problem. So in parallel to getting clear about the perspective of employees, we also spent time getting very clear on the problem. So we'll start quoting our friend Albert Einstein. This quote captures the spirit of pausing and what some of you may have heard the expression going slow to go fast. It's easy to jump into doing things without spending this time up front, but that doesn't usually pay off. So the spirit of this quote here, which Albert Einstein is saying, is if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd actually spend 55 minutes getting really clear on the problem and the last 5 minutes solving it. So this is definitely a spirit that we support. And we did this in this project by starting off with everyone on that cross-functional team that Jess was talking about, creating a success letter. So we use this in a number of projects. It's a great way to kick off transformation work, especially in the realm of values and cultures where it can be hard to get everybody on the same page. So this technique asks people that are leading the program to put themselves in the shoes of someone who's thanking them for the work, which also you may make the connection there that's helping with the empathy side. So what would this person write? What would they thank them for? What would they mention or notice and see what's different in the organization? So we got everyone to write these letters and then pulled out the common themes across them, and this helped guide our work throughout the project. You've probably been able to see by looking at the slide some of the ideas on that success letter that were important themes as we rolled out this work. So you might remember this picture of the mountain from early on in our presentation where we said that sharing purpose in an organization can feel a bit hazy. The nice thing is that after you spend time on the empathy and defining the problem, the mountain feels much more like this. So now those activities of defining the problem and understanding your people are very effective at clearing the fog. So we now know what we want to achieve, we can see the top of the mountain, we know what success looks like for our people, and we just need to climb the mountain, which some idea and prototyping will do. So that's where there's ideating is an important part of design thinking. There's many ways of brainstorming and calling out ideas. So in this case, we used our cross-functional team, but we also expanded the group at this point to bring in ideas from other people with fresh ideas, other points, other perspectives in the organization around how we would share purpose and values. Jess will speak about this more, but in a nutshell, sharing the purpose and values we knew from early on was going to involve an event, but we were very clear from the beginning there was much work to do before the event, then there would be the event, and then a lot of work after. So this ideating was both around this event, which was very important, but as well as how we could lead up to the event and how we could continue the work after. Prototyping. So you might ask yourself, how do you prototype and test a human experience that involves many people? So we do sometimes in supporting design thinking, do some role playing. That can be something that you use. For something like this, we found it more effective to use an experience blueprint. So this is a tool from the service design world. It's a great tool for designing experiences. So some key aspects of it is there's a front stage experience around what all your employees are going to experience. This is quite zoomed out, but just to give you some perspective, like the blue at the top was pre-event, the gray was leading up to the event immediately, the green was the event, and then there was quite a number of stages after that. So we mapped out that entire experience. It covered how purpose and values were going to be shared, as well as the things to support it. So just to zoom in a little bit, so this, I'll show you in a second how large this blueprint ended up being. A tiny bit of it is getting very clear on different moments through the experience and getting very clear about what the employee experience would be. So you can see here that we had things, we knew we had things we wanted to avoid. So we could say we had mapping out every single thing, what we wanted to avoid. So employees could think or feel, how much would this really mean? And then get very clear on what we do want them to say. So we wanted employees to say, this event means something because we have the autonomy and power to create a culture that works for us. So we mapped this out throughout the map. So we got a very detailed experience on it, which was something we could prototype. Just to show how that started off. So the slide on the left in the red was really initiating that, where we started off with stickies. There were sessions in between that, and then you can see on the right there how large the map became. So it started out really lo-fi and then got bigger. So that was where we now had something we could test. And that was, again, thinking back to our personas and our archetypes, we could start getting feedback from people around what the experience was going to be, around what they wanted to experience around it, and continue to iterate on it throughout the process. So that covered using design thinking. So how might we then share and embed the purpose and values? What came out of that design thinking process? So that's where I'm going to turn it over to Jess to show you what happened after that.
Thanks, Barb. So I know you're all asking here, what purpose and values did Arc'teryx share? So I'm excited to share this with you. This is currently not an external facing purpose or a marketing slogan, so you are really getting an insider's view here. Here's our organizational purpose. We build tools to enable and inspire. The we really defines Arc'teryx as a collective. Build, we construct, prototype, test, and iterate. This is our process, combining form and function into a single harmonious object. Tools, so our perspective is really driven by function and utility, and our products are purposeful. They're a means of accomplishing a task. Two, helps us set an objective and not simply a description. Enable is really about delivering capacity and making things possible. And inspire, we want to motivate, influence, and plant the seeds of dreams. We also came up with these 4 core values. So evolve for us really isn't about evolving our product, or isn't just about evolving our product, rather. It's really about evolving as people. So personally, I started in a sales analyst role, and I've gone through a number of different roles in the organization, and am now leading our internal communications and employee experience. And my journey at Arc'teryx is not uncommon. Even our senior director of IS started in shipping and receiving. So there's a lot of evolution that happens. Commit for us is really about jumping in with both feet. We're committed to our local factory and to our partners worldwide. Live it. For us, this is really about living and breathing the sports we build products for. And do right. We're committed to being good humans and making the right choice, even when it's the hard one. We also came up with our beautiful code of the collective, which are 10 key behaviors that describe us when we're operating at our best. So how did we share this out? We launched with an event to really accelerate the change. And this event was really the wedding of our values and our people, putting a ring on that relationship. We called it our Evolution Summit, and it was a key element, as Barb mentioned, and even the centerpiece of the blueprint. So here's the Evolution Summit. There were 2 full days of events. One day was an inside day where staff spent the day rotating through different value stations and listening to stories about the code of the collective and asking lots of questions. And then the other day was a Live It Day, where people chose an activity to participate in for most of the day, from snowshoeing, skiing, biking, climbing. I did a 5-hour blissful yoga session. The weather was horrible, but it was also very Arc'teryx not to complain about the weather, because we believe that there is no such thing as bad weather, there's just bad gear. So each of us at the event got an identity book and an evolution notebook, so gifts for everyone, which was a beautiful memento of the day and of the journey that we've been on. And we committed to continuing this work in the days, weeks, and months afterwards. And we did this in various ways, which I'm going to share a few of these with you now. So campfires, Code of the Collective campfires were introduced, and this one was really about continuing the conversation. These are workshops where we normalize the concepts of our Code of the Collective through storytelling and really creating space for people to identify with it personally. We also created an internal communications roadmap. So in order for our values and culture and purpose work to thrive, we felt that having a robust communication strategy was integral. We mirrored the values and purpose work and really leveraged what was now a familiar process. And so we now have a volunteer team of communication and culture ambassadors who are piloting, championing, and moving things forward in this realm. So we previously had a learning program, but we've completely revamped it with ARC Learning. And we are finding new ways through this to grow our people while working to encompass and strengthen the Code of the Collective behaviors. So in addition to technical skills and some amazing leadership training, we do workshops on design thinking and feedback. And we also have a full day long personal purpose workshop. So this is really where we create opportunities for self-reflection, which allows people to make connection between what is my organization about and what am I about. And this is a chance for people to do their part in creating purpose in their work, because purpose ultimately is a two-way effort. We've deliberately designed all of our company huddles, which happen monthly, to celebrate our values and our purpose. For example, we share shout outs, which shine a light on people embodying our values in our Code of the Collective. And this meeting has really gone from like, I have to go to I can't wait to go. We've also introduced values awards and value stories for, around those folks who embody each of our values. There's a nomination process in the fall, and it's celebrated at our holiday party with a red carpet event in the winter. We've also launched a social tool. We've used Yammer, and this is really about connecting employees to Live It, our core value, as well as where we do our values award nominations and where people can connect on all sorts of interests. And the social tool for us is really about unearthing those real conversations in real time. So what did we learn? We learned quite a few things. So 1 year later, we have a mix of both anecdotal and survey data, and we're going to continue to fine tune our measurement year over year as we go forward. I'm going to make a point to say that there were some challenges. So the team was pretty stretched and needed a break after all of their massive efforts to bring this to life. The team was made up of a bunch of high performers and influencers, and this was done in addition to their regular jobs. And everyone was learning by doing as they went. So that meant it took a little bit longer than planned. I think we had originally planned on about 6 months, and it ended up being about 18 months. And another thing to note is that this sort of archaeology really does take time, and it's worth it. One other challenge we've encountered is that the values and purpose work have really landed quite differently at our factory, and we're still working on how to properly embrace this. We've got a new senior manager of people and culture there now who is taking that on. So what are we hearing? This is Dan Walker, who is our senior executive coordinator. He also runs our In My Backyard, also known as the IMBY program, which is around our community initiatives, granting and donations. And he really finds value in the Code of the Collective every day, whether it's during coaching conversations with his team or helping inform business decisions. he's finding that it really provides him with the language and understanding to do what's right for the business and for the community. We've also got John, our president, who immediately saw certain people create Live It goals, which they took as seriously as any business-related goals. And then Mariah is one of our people and culture business partners, and she says that identifying our foundation created an aligned language to articulate what a career here truly is. Our commitment is sharing the essence of Arc'teryx and the experience candidates can expect to have. This work was key to delivering a clear picture of our brand. This really signifies that we've given our recruiters and business partners a foundation to work from, and that will also help us bring people into the organization that are also aligned and more likely to be fulfilled by their work. Our design development team has also found the tools have given them an opportunity to review and realign processes based on what is right for both the business and our teams, and to focus on the most relevant needs to evolve. And it's also helped us sharpen our brand promise because we are now better able to reflect who we are on the inside outwards. So for the numbers geeks in the room, we measured impact with a post-launch survey that ultimately tied to the original Culture Amp one. And we saw a great improvement since last year. So when asked whether you agree with the statement, I believe Arc'teryx has a core driving purpose, we've seen an improvement post-launch versus pre. And when asked whether Arc'teryx makes values-based decisions even when it's hard, we've also seen a major improvement there. Still we've got some work to do there, but it's definitely an improvement. When asked post-launch whether people understand our values, 89% of people agreed, and 79% they said they understood the Code of the Collective. So again, great improvement, but it is still showing us where we can pay some attention going forward. So this journey wasn't easy, and it took a lot longer than we expected, and it was worth it. Using design thinking to establish our purpose and values, we've enabled and inspired our employees with the guidance and tools they need to perform at their best. And we believe it's truly evolved the entire Arc'teryx experience. We're all more aligned with our purpose and values, and we all have a greater sense of who we are. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian. We'll open it up to Q&A, and Brian will moderate your questions.
Thanks so much for the webinar to both of you. And I also want to thank you. I'm going to put your contact information up, but you've said that people can write you and ask you questions if they have personal questions, and I'll make sure their email gets up here in just a moment. But we have one question coming in here. Jessica, this sounds like it's for you. Can you tell me how the executive leadership team was engaged through this process?
Oh yeah, actually, Barb, do you want to take this one as the person who sort of was on the front end of that one?
So they were quite engaged. Like as Jess mentioned, there was the team that she mentioned was very empowered, but there was lots of check-ins and feedback from the executive team throughout, both on the naming of the values and the purpose, as well as the different activities planned. And then they were quite involved in the event, and they continue to be involved.
Yeah, great. And the second one here, I love what you've done to continue to embed the purpose in your organization. Is the original team that developed the purpose also a long-term governance team for keeping it alive, or have you organized to govern the continued efforts?
Ah, good one. So Laura, whose face you saw a couple times up there in the presentation, she is now our senior manager of people and culture, and she was obviously a big player or a key player in the original efforts. So the experience is now owned by people and culture, sort of under her care, and it's actually my job now to continue on this work. The originals are definitely still around as a sounding board, but we've got, as I mentioned, that team of communication and culture ambassadors who are really keeping a finger on the pulse of the organization for us and carrying the work forward.
Awesome, great. We have a question rolling here, and I'm going to put you on the spot here because I haven't shared it with you yet. Can you share what the problem you identified was as part of the design thinking process.
Okay, you mean the problem that we were solving with the work?
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, something we didn't get too into that. I guess we talked about the why more generally in the webinar. So more specifically, the problem defined for the rolling out the purpose and values was people were seeing around the organization a lot of debating around the why instead of the how. So that was something that really resonated with people, that because people care so deeply about the purpose, but there weren't words for it. There was a lot of time wasted. Is this really who we are? Does this reflect who we are? Yes, no. So they couldn't move on and talk about the why. The other one is the rapid growth that Arc'teryx was and continues to go through, with people joining so rapidly. So the onboarding is much more effective now too, and that goes also to the recruiting. They're more better able to recruit. And then the other one is that there's a real, sometimes I've heard John call Arc'teryx a holacracy. So there's this idea of people having autonomy. And I think, Jess, you talked about that being the purpose and values being my foundation to give employees autonomy in their work.
Yeah, and just to build on that as well, that when we shared sort of at the beginning of the presentation, talking about that journey or that story of the why, and really maintaining the essence of who we are as we grow. That was, I think, what I would say the original problem was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, that's perfect.
I mean, sorry to beat this one to death. It was just that, that I think everybody knows that it was a story of going from great to greater, right? We know that we're great, and we think by defining this, we can be even greater.
That's great.
I like that.
So someone has asked about the presentation. Will it be shared? We did record it, and so we will be posting the recording. We will send out to everyone that came to the webinar today the link to the presentation where it's recorded, so you'll have it. Yeah, and I'm glad to see that you liked it, so thanks for that feedback too. So another question is coming in. Have you measured any impact on employee attraction and retention? I guess it's one of those scorecard numbers, and where does that sit for you guys in terms of priority?
That's it's definitely on our radar. We don't have a specific metric yet. We've established our baseline, and that'll be part of our measurement going forward.
Yeah, great. And last question here so far is, can you share a little bit more about the stories you use to normalize your values and make them personal for people? Now, I know personally, just knowing this story, having authentic values that people could pull from and tell stories from was part of the process of creating an authentic purpose and values. Like, you weren't creating values that people would go, oh, that's a surprise. And so you were, and part of the process or part of the journey was making sure that everything you did was authentic to the organization.
Right.
You mentioned it being kind of an archaeological activity, but maybe you could speak to the stories that you used to help people get connected to them.
Sure. Well, there's the stories that were shared particularly around how some of these values were arrived at during the launch event. But what we've done, to continue embedding the concepts. For example, yesterday we had a leadership training session with about 80 of our leaders, and each of them had to work in groups to share an example of a piece of the code of the collective, a story around when they saw it working, and then a story of when they saw that behavior not being modeled and why it didn't work, and comparing the two. So really normalizing that concept.
Great.
And I'd also say the day of the event that you showed there, you mentioned how people went to different stations, right?
Yeah.
So there were stations for the values and the code of the collective, and I would say at the heart of that day was really examples of true stories that individuals and groups in the company have gone through that reflect those values.
Exactly.
That's great. And I love that you've given space for people to call out that we have stories in our organization where we're not living the values, and it's safe to talk about that, because that's about redirecting to be making more values-based decisions.
Yeah.
And I mean, just to again beat that one to death too, is that I mean, the day started off with John, the president, really kicking the day off with some personal stories that really set the tone. So that was the beginning of the day, is him sharing his own story of how he arrived at Arc'teryx, and everyone that took the stage really started off with their own story of how they landed at Arc'teryx and how it lined up with their own values.
Yeah.
That's great. Last question here. What does lo-fi mean? It was used on a slide.
Oh yeah, I tend to overuse that when I forget people don't always understand it. So it's the opposite of high fidelity. So lo-fi is not having say professional visual designer, not having the details. So it's low fidelity. So just the broad idea. So a great example is a lot of sticky notes on a wall is pretty lo-fi. If you take that, refine that, add a ton of detail, maybe refine the design of it, Excel, then it becomes more high fidelity with the details. Maybe a shorter version answer is just less details.
That's great. I think that's all the questions we had come in. One thing I did want to do and plug, because it's related to some of the questions that came in, is we have another webinar coming up. We don't have the exact date picked yet, but it's about how people that might have an interest in moving a purpose engagement in their organizations along, how do they get that going? What are the things that are roadblocks to that? Who needs to be on that team? So the webinar is kind of a continuation of this one to get a bit more hands-on with some of the ways that people might be able to initiate these kinds of projects in their own organization. And with that, I will say thanks everyone online for hanging out today and listening to the webinar. And we were excited to be able to share this with you. The contact information is there if you do want to write Jessica or Barbara. And we'll say goodbye. Thanks very much.